Good day. Coming to you on this 15th day of April 2024 in the Gregorian calendar. And I say, what a beautiful, beautiful day outside. This purpose that I've come to you today, I want to establish a pattern of checking in with you a few times a day. I'll announce the meeting times a little bit better. I invite you to like and share this with people who are interested in peace, interested in order, and know the significance of the eclipse that we just experienced and want redemption. Want redemption. Either you've already been redeemed or you want to be redeemed, right? You see that there are people around the world that are waiting for us to wake up as a people from our state of Babylon, because the system is not sustainable. And so we must wake up from our baby state. And we don't have to be perfect before we start having these conversations. So something that came up for me, well, let me just say, I'm kei'yah, I'm here, sui juris, that's on my own right. Appropriate persona and my appropriate person, not a juristic person. I stand over that juristic entity. I've made several claims about that. And this is part of my journey, is sharing as I learn. So what has stood out for me when I look at some of the barriers of us coming together as a people who are original and indigenous to these lands known as Amarak or United States of America, or I say the beloved land to Mary. What's important to know is I think one of the barriers to unity is how we refer to ourselves. Now, at the end of the day, how we identify ourselves, it doesn't change the core of who we are as people. It doesn't change the core of who we are. However, you're seen as incompetent if you let people call you out of your name. Okay? I've been in situations where you hear someone refer to someone in a derogatory thing, and everybody will get offended. Why would you get offended if someone calls out a name that doesn't suit you, call you out your name? They must not be talking to you. They must not really be talking to you, because that's not a name or a label that you respond to. So if they're talking to you, they will respond, they will call you something that is reflective of what you want to be called or what is accurate. All right, so I talk about this for this main point again: unity, unity, unity. I've seen this many times where someone will say, "Oh, I'm Black," or they'll say, "Oh, I'm African American." They'll say, "I'm a Moor." They'll say any number of things, and this ties into nationality. And I hopefully will be able to tie all these concepts in together when it comes to our redemption as a people. And it's good to say, yes, I'm a part of a nation. I'm a part of a nation. And then you might not have agreed of what the nation will be called in commerce. And I want to also share about the importance of making sure, from a people and policy perspective, you understand that there's a missed opportunity when we don't identify exactly, who your nation is. All right. So, and then maybe the pros and cons of what nationality you choose your status to be. And your status is different than your standing. Okay. Living people stand. Living people stand. In law, you're standing, okay? Now, I'm not talking about like physically, because there are people who don't have the ability to stand. It doesn't make them not people. They're people, okay? Now, we have in law nations and natural persons, NAT, naturalized, NAT. So what comes up for me is nations are made of natural persons. And so you have a commercial identity. So with the commercial identity, you join together and you're able to have your needs, wants, and desires be heard. And so, yes, the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous People, and also the Organization of American States Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, these are just that, declarations, but many have not made that law. I have said that in the jurisdiction upon which I come, which is a superior jurisdiction to any consular courts. If you look up the word consular, you will understand why I say that. But when you go, if you're given some type of challenge in commerce, and you just speak only from your consular court, sometimes it cannot, speak from your superior jurisdiction, and it's not in the right form, they will not hear you or acknowledge you and make it seem as if you're not in your right mind because you're speaking and presenting as a living being. And in their jurisdiction, they can only deal with the non-living. And in this case, I will even say the national. They can deal with the national. It's a natural person. See, so most of the time, these little definitions don't really impact anything. But when you're dealing with legal matters, I'm coming to see the time we're in now, people are holding on to a construct that is falling apart. So now everything really matters. At one time, you could say you were a natural person and you're living and breathing and everything will go through fine. But now, some people are experiencing a little bit of resistance. I would say this is just for the passport issue. Okay, just for the passport issue. It might be the case that someone who's expecting a passport, maybe they should be applying for a visa. See, because Babylon is falling and it's known that the banks depend on the people's energy. All right, when we're born, we're given a certain amount of gold based on our weight. And it's tied into the whole banking system. So with this being the case, if you're using a passport or a visa to go into a corporate jurisdiction, might it be the case that you want to go in as a living being who's traveling, as with the visa, versus as cargo? And so there was a time when, yes, they made exceptions and they could produce a passport with no social security number. But now maybe it doesn't really make sense to do it like that anymore because of these bonds and things like that. So, and there were times that your social security number is used, even when you don't present it, it ties into your phone account or other things that you have started in the name that is attached to the social security number. If you haven't done any kind of remediation on that, if you haven't done any claims in commerce to claim your birthright, to discharge and offset these bills, which are kind of a currency. You can accept a bill. You can accept the bill, say this is correct, and you can put it in trust and discharge it and offset it. That's the honorable way. Okay, so not getting into all the layers right now, but I do want to talk about the importance of restating some of the things that have been said about our people. Because if we don't restate them officially, then we'll have the same conversation as long as we're here. And in the meantime, there'll be those who would love to profit from making sure we're not here by collecting on the bonds that are on us. So this is part of us coming out of these bonds as a people. Now, also, I'll show you in just a few minutes about customary international law and nation states and how silence is acquiescence. So if we as a people looking for freedom, looking for justice and mercy and grace, of course, knowing that we're supposed to lead the way as righteous servants of the Most High, this must be talked about. Okay, so people are people. And even though you might not know you have a nationality, you were given a nationality if you were born anywhere, like on these lands in the United States of America, major, the land, the trust is what I'm talking about. Okay, there are claims on that. There are claims on that. But it's known in international law that the claims come by way of trust. And there's a trust that is established several trusts established when you were born. Okay. Now, these trusts also, some of them hold our estates. There are minor estates, and then depending on who you are, you indigenous to this land, you have an estate that other people don't have. And until you've claimed your estate, the estate is abandoned. And the state is abandoned, and other people, let's say the trustees for the Pope, the governors, the attorney generals, they're managing your estate, and you're said to be in a state of incompetency. You're a minor at law because you have not claimed your estate. And so there's a lot of false information out there about this whole process. And now I'm even seeing some people who have been spewing out half truths and lies, or now they're telling you the truth. Well, the only reason I know that it's true or not true is because I actually go and read the documents. So you can kind of figure it out, right? You have to read the documents. But so someone who's just listening to these experts or gurus tell you something, you will miss when they're actually telling you the truth, because for so long they weren't telling you the truth. It is a change in the season and the times that we're in. Okay, so as it relates to restating Indian, Amer-Indian, and let's start with Indian and Amer-Indian. Okay. Now, American Indian and Native American, they're not the same. They're not the same. Now, let me be specific when I'm talking about restating. Mind you, I'm coming from a superior jurisdiction. I'm not talking about the state of whatever wherever you are. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the United States corporation codes. That is their codes and their corporate jurisdiction. And it is not for me to restate that at this time. I could take on a fiduciary role and restate that. However, that seems to be chaotic to me, that I, one person, will restate the whole corporate code, what that means in commerce for the whole entire world. That doesn't make sense. And to me, there's a form called the SF 181. Is it? Yeah. It's called ethnicity and race identification. Now, this is a United States corporate form. On the left side of that, if you were to Google it, you would see there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 categories. All the categories, the definition of the category has all except for one: American Indian or Alaskan Native, a person having origins in the original peoples of North and South America. It says the same thing for Asian. Origins of the original peoples. Now, it doesn't say that for Black. It says a person having origins in any of the Black racial groups of Africa. Well, there's no such thing as a Black racial group. There's no such thing as a Black racial group. Okay, this is Black. This is Black. And there's no racial group that is this color or this lineage. There's no place such as Blackland. No one comes from Blackland. And even the word Black in the English language, let's just say if you had a color wheel and you put all the colors together and you spun it around, it would be this color, maybe right here. And if you think of the movie Casablanca, Blanca, that all the colors together is a little bit closer to even what the original Blanca meant. See, so we have to know our words and how we're saying them. So whether it's a racial group like this or a racial group like this, like there's no such thing. Like someone, Taj Tariq Bey says, people think they're crayon colors. Okay, so it's important at this time, the 15th of April, to restate this. This is the terms or nationalities of Indian, Amer-Indian. That's important because I'm hearing many people say, I'm not a Moor. I'm not a Moor. I don't identify with being a Moor. Now, do I get it? Why they would be called a Moor and why they don't want to be called a Moor? From what perspective? Someone who knows treaty law, you understand about the Treaty of Marrakesh. You understand even in history that the dark-skinned people in many places were called Moors. And definitely in England and Great Britain, there's a title of Moor put on the dark-skinned tribes here in the Americas. But that doesn't mean that that's what all the tribes called themselves. See, we have now this information highway, so we have to adjust our thinking based on what we know. We know that it's kind of rude to call someone something that they don't identify with, and it's not culturally correct. Many, many, many people who were here, whose ancestors were here in the Americas, their ancestors did not tell them that they were Moors. They told them, you're Indian or you're Indian, you're Indian, INJUN, or I've seen it, I think INGEN, Indian, just like that. It's been written that way. So that's their culture. That's their culture. That's what their ancestors told them. So for someone else to tell them, even though it's good intended, and I will explain the good intention that comes when someone tells you, don't call yourself Indian, call yourself a Moor. Why? Well, if you go to the Declaration of Independence, you can Google the Declaration of Independence, and at the National Archives store, well, no, maybe it's not where I found it, but I did find it on, let's see, on the docs.house.gov/meetings. Okay, and then there's a PDF with the Declaration of Independence, 1776. Now, this was voted on, accepted unanimously. Declaration of the 13 United Small U States of America. Okay, so two things stand out for me. And so you understand what I'm saying about the necessity to restate Indian, because right now in law, it is a misnomer in U.S. law as it relate in U.S. legal code statutes as it relates to people who want to be restored to their inheritance. Okay, the restoration of the inheritance, as those who are rendering it, is like a qualification piece to it. You want to be seen as competent. That just is what it is. It's these estates, family estates, are being held, to my understanding thus far, based on the estates in the 1500s by England. Okay. And they're family estates. And so the interests, once someone passes away, goes back to the estates until they're claimed. So it's important that we know that this matter we are facing now has to do with the reversionary interest in our ancestral estates. And we have not claimed it. And no one is going to tell us that it has not already told us. Now, Grand Sheik Taj Tariq Bey has been one of the most vocal people in sharing this. But I think some people might not hear him because and this is this is the purpose of religion. He is maybe a different religion. Well, I don't even know that is his religion, because he strongly says, like, the point is what is best for the people in unity, no matter what someone else was promoting. So Noble Jew Ali, who put a trust on the record that really affected the economy, he talked about this issue of estate and claiming our vast estate. But he did it under the religious umbrella. And so now we're learning even more that all these religions, these corporate religions, come under the Roman Curia order. And of course, it really stands out to someone like me who sees the difference in the culture. And it's respectable that someone has a religion that they're able to connect to the Most High. But that's just not the culture of my ancestors. These religions were created many, many years, many years after my ancestors were. Before religion was our ancestors, before corporate religion were our ancestors. And they followed the cycle of the moon as it relates to a new moon and a new month, okay? A new moon and a new month. And so we can't continue to disregard the patterns in the heavens and just say, oh, well, this is Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, and all these days that actually that takes away from me honoring my foremothers and my forefathers when I hold to a calendar that doesn't respect how my foremothers and my forefathers lived their lives. And they did not idolize their gods. They did not idolize their nobles. And so that's another shift we have to make. You know, it's not that our ancestors had a whole bunch of gods they bowed down to and all. No. They did not idolize the gods as many people do now. They idolize the gods as something outside of them that they need in order to be righteous. Okay. I know it seems like I'm going on a tangent, but I just want to be clear. So I already showed you on the SF 181, that's a U.S. corporate form. And for those who want redemption, you have to choose what you do. Do you want to be surety and collateral for corporate debts? Or do you want to help rebuild the nations because Babylon is fallen and the Pope wants the money, even though the security interest is actually for the people if the people would claim it. So you have to know how to claim it. All right. And I don't want you to get distracted because somebody called you a Moor and you're not a Moor, or you don't see yourself as a Moor. Someone called you a Moor. That's what makes your status a Moor. That's what makes your status Moor or Moorish, is because, let me read this Declaration of Independence. Because for the early treaties, the contracts that the treaties and the covenants and that sort of thing that were created, they didn't include, no one at the table sat there and said, sure, I'll give you title to this land, because we didn't have land titles like that. Okay. So many of the people who were indigenous here, they weren't party to the treaties. And if you read the Postal Union treaties, you'll see that some of those were made with, quote unquote, that's what it said, half breeds. And then those who were original and indigenous here, not half breeds, they were in objection to some of these treaties. So we must stand over the treaties, because this is like our way out, in my opinion. And it is just my opinion. You should study and show yourself approved, because if I'm mistaken about something and you just followed me blindly, then here I am accidentally being a Judas goat. I don't want that. I don't want the sheeple to just follow me without prayer and understanding. Without prayer and understanding. And don't think that the way you learned it is the way it is, because if that was correct, then the world would be peaceful already, because there's abundance here. So it's only 3 pages. Yes, it's tiny writing, but here it says, when it comes to the Declaration of Independence, it says, first of all, it talks about the people. Let me go up a little bit. I'm going to read it. How about that? It's not that long. It's really not that long. And if you read the facts, then you can get true history, and then you can know what people are saying on TV. Because if you see people on these blurbs, vote for me, do this, do that, and you don't know the law, then you just fall for anything. In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands that have connected them with another and assume among them the powers of the earth, the separate and equal nation to which the laws of nature and the nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. Now, some have said, notably, we'll get into this another day, there's a difference between man and mankind. Okay. All right. So, now this is 1776. Remember, it was in 1492 that there started to be the colonization, the doctrine of discovery, which was repudiated just last year. The Pope said the contracts are null and void, but it's not the first time that he's made reference to it. It's just that all the actions don't line up with it. And it is up to the people to wake up, to claim back what has been released unto them, to claim it back. But because we're so conditioned with wrong information, and we think it's sometimes a sin to just read, we miss everything. Okay, we don't miss everything, but we miss a lot. So we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, just a little pause here. Mind you, we were not included in this, and I'm going to show you. But the principles are true, and I stand over it. And just because someone didn't include me in something doesn't mean that I am not. It does not mean that I am not um, deserving of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I am. I am. I am. As an heiress on this land, wherever I am, that's what I'm going to search for and look for and walk in. All right. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Okay. So now we're starting to get into why we must choose a nationality. Now, because if there are injustices, we must, in an organized manner, make it known to the nations, to the civilized nations, that we don't consent to this. So one person saying, I don't consent to being targeted, I don't consent to the Department of Homeland Security attacks, I don't consent to these different programs that, let's say the Tuskegee study. It's been over 50 years now since it was determined that these type of studies are not ethical. But yet still today, they still have a lot of money put into subjugating, experimenting on, and doing social engineering on the original indigenous people of the land that they have labeled as stock for their corporation. And they have made loans to the stock. And this is where things are collapsing as people wake up. It's not ethical to make loans to stock, and then as they get older, claim them into a guardianship situation to budget the banks. So the system doesn't collapse. Now, we don't want the system to collapse, because if we as of right now, we're not in any kind of system that is like cashless. So we don't want the public banks to collapse, but we don't want to remain collateral for the debt either. Okay, so governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So I'm saying I don't consent to being maltreated. I don't consent to having my conveyance stolen, and then I can't get a police number. It's many things that if you go to targetedjustice.com, you will find the many things that are perpetrated upon the quote unquote citizens that are under the subjugation of the United States corporation. And even those who don't want to be, they're saying, making claims in commerce to say, no, I'm not under your subjugation. I know the law, but that doesn't mean that they stop, that they just, okay, you're right. No. One piece, you must put a trust on the record. You must put a trust on the record. And this is one piece about nationality, is that unless you've declared a particular nationality, you're born in the United States, then whatever corporate state your commercial entity was birthed into would be your nationality. But with that, you also, I did a search recently, and I found out that already they're reverting back to the older constitutions. So there's some property that I'm responsible for in coming out of, listen, the things I've been challenged with, I understand it so that I can learn how to properly claim my inheritance. Because if I was never put in these situations, the credit score would be 800, the quote unquote dead pledge mortgage would be, quote unquote paid on time. These are not proper terms. I did not know that. Okay. As a people, we are to discharge and offset our debt to save the system so we can still get resources, so we can still get food, we can get water. We don't have to wonder if someone is going to offer us to collect the insurance money. Okay. And so let me go here. It says that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. Now, am I an enemy of the state for reading the Declaration of Independence? Maybe. I am peace. I am peace. I am love. And that's what I'm coming to you at. I'm just reading it, which we are conditioned to not do. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on the principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Safety and happiness. Is it safe that our water is poisoned? Is it safe that our conveyances are stolen, our cars, and we don't get a police report? Is it safe the carjackings? Is it safe that the marijuana is laced with synthetic drugs that is supposed to be state regulated? Is it safe that attorneys make decisions on the different health professionals, what they can do and not do, even though they're attorneys, not health professionals? Okay. Prudence, indeed, will dictate what the government's long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. Okay. This conversation I'm having with you today is not me trying to convince anyone that government needs to change its structure. I think it's well observed based on the statistics that there's some type of change that needs to happen. So that's not the point. I have no call to action other than to just let it be known that I am declaring the restatement of the terms Amer-Indian, Indian, Now, accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. So basically, it's like the frog and the heating up water. Most people will just stand there as long as they can. Okay. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their clear right, it is their duty to throw off such government and provide new guards for their future security. Guards for their future security. I am proposing that we call ourselves what is in line with what our foremothers and forefathers called us, not what somebody else called us or did not call us. Because for a Moor who knows the law and they know what was said about the original indigenous people here, the savage Indians, if someone cares about you, they might say to you, you might not want to call yourself a savage Indian when you could just call yourself a Moor. See, don't call yourself a savage Indian. Call yourself a Moor, because that's what your oppressor is calling you anyway. Your oppressor is calling you a Moor. If you call yourself a Moor, you can align with the protections that come with a Moor. So it makes sense. There's no hate there. However, it was the saying from a people, the path to hell was paved with good intentions. See, so even though there's good intentions there, is it all the time true? Okay, so I think the term was made to be a derogatory term. And in global and international law, the Aboriginal people have protections, and it is upon that that I have the right to say it is necessary to restate Amer-Indian. And I am differentiating that from American Indian because it is a corporate term that is used in the US. So I don't want to mix that. I don't want to mix jurisdictions. So that's why I'm saying that. If someone else wants to take steps in commerce, they can. So there are many issues when it comes to that, but it's not for me to say that at this time. But if you were to fill out the 181 again, if you were, it would be more accurate to check American Indian or white, because these are people groups. They're people groups. The original people to the land would better be described as American Indian, okay? If that's what we want to do. But I'm not trying to restate that term. I'm saying Amer-Indian. And someone can come and say, but the original copper-colored, quote unquote, person who's usually labeled as a 14th Amendment citizen is actually the original Indian. I'm saying Amer-Indian. All right. When a long train of abuses and surpasses, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under despotism, under absolute despotism, it is their right and their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Your words are your guards too. Your words guard you. If you don't know your words, you put yourself in danger, right? That's why a Moor would tell you, don't call yourself that. Okay. Don't call yourself Indian. That's why a Moor would tell you that, because your words can hurt you in a certain jurisdiction, in a corporate jurisdiction. Okay. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former system of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations. Now, all having in direct object to the establishment of an absolute tyranny over the states. To prove this, let the facts be submitted to the candid world. Now, let me share with you. If you look up the dates, you'll see the King of Great Britain. Who was the King of Great Britain? I already know who it is. The King of Great Britain in 1776 was a British Moor. The King of Great Britain in 1776 was a British Moor, a dark skinned British Moor. So many of these peoples were Anglo Saxons. Maybe not all of them. Some of them were Anglo Saxons, and they were being mistreated per this is what this is saying. And there, I'll go on to read it. So that's how I can say too, the culture is different. The culture is different. And Curie Mayo, he had a really good book that was talking about how just because people were dark skinned doesn't mean that they were necessarily the same peoples. The culture was brought here was different than the culture of those who were already here. So then to just call yourself with the oppressive culture called you, it's like it's not going to resonate with people ever. And so if people are always asked to do that, we will never unify, ever, ever, ever unify. So this is why it's important to restate. Okay, I know what was said about me, but I also know what is true. Okay, to prove this, let the facts be submitted to the candid world. He has refused to assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass. He was a little bit of a manipulative, right? You know how people just I've seen animals do it. I've seen babies do it. You know somebody's talking to you, but you're like, oh, you act like you didn't hear. So, all right. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of a large district of people, unless those people would relinquish the right to reparation in the legislature. A right inestimable to them. Did I say that word right? Inestimable. Yes, to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant. Oh, I've seen leaders do that too. You know, they'll give you like 1 week to do something that takes like 3 months. You know, like it's just unreasonable expectation. It's not achievable. When you set goals, if they're honest goals, then they're specific, they're measurable, achievable, realistic, and time sensitive. So when people set goals that aren't any of those things, they come off as disingenuous. So, okay, I don't know this man. I don't want to be disrespectful. I'm just noticing human behavior and different patterns that people have, you know. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and a distance from the depository of their public records. So they might have something equivalent to counties or whatever have you, where the public record is kept. And they didn't have email. They had to physically move the paper, move the records around. So there was a depository of their public record. And so to have a meeting somewhere other than where that agreed upon depository was, that was a deterrent for people maybe to come together and unify around issues that were pertinent to their situation. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with mainly firmness his invasion on the rights of the people. The rights of the people. So in 1776, these people came over here trying to not be mistreated anymore. And sometimes the ones who are hurt the most end up hurting others. Okay. He has refused for a long time, and after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise. The state of remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. Now, let me just say this too. When people talk about the quote unquote federal government, I think it's important to note something that is the case on these lands here, right? Which you don't see really, you don't really see this because of maybe the melting pot. There are many reasons, but what you don't see is you don't see Virginians having a fight with Marylanders. You don't see that. And on other continents, see, a Virginian is a nationality. A Marylander is a nationality, according to international law. Like each governor can have their own international relationships. That's why you see some governors travel overseas, or sometimes people will come here, dignitaries will come here and meet with the governors, because they can be responsible for trade in that way as a sovereign state, getting their powers from the people. Though the governor gets his powers from the people, his or her powers from the people. It's not just independent. But on other continents, you will see, I guess, because of the ethno nations. That's one drawback of an ethno nation, is that you right next door neighbors, and now you're fighting each other. You can't even fully enjoy the land because you're fighting each other. You're two different religions, and yes, the culture makes you maybe slightly different bloodline. But at the end of the day, even the religions, any religion that is promoting violence against their neighbor, that's not the original true religion anyway. And that is obsolete way to live. That's obsolete. I do a Rico Warranto on anyone who promotes ideas that is a way to live. That's an okay way to spend anyone's time and energy, is promoting these type of wars. Okay, he, talking about the king, he has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing to assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made himself the judge. I'm adding this now. He's made himself the judge. And so J-U-D, what is here? That word Judah, judicial, Judah, for all you who are awakening to what's happening, okay? And you think about who the 12 tribes of Israel are, and you think about the Americas and how they play a role in the scriptures, and watching some of the presentations of UB TV, Dane Calloway, Rod Hayes, Curie Mayo, Killer Priest has some good folks on there. There are other people who really share the history very well. And my time is such that I'm so busy trying to get my things in order. I haven't gained the skill set and the time to sit down and put on the channel links to some of these folks that help my understanding. And they're sharing knowledge. We have to move forward in knowledge, not in our opinions, especially when we have knowledge at our fingertips. It's knowledge, understanding, and then wisdom. People feel good about the choices that they make, but their information is not based in knowledge. It's based in soul ties to what they believe to be true. So they feel good about things that aren't true. It's something we all must guard ourselves against. We don't have to guard ourselves against getting knowledge. We have to guard ourselves against our egos and our being set in patterns and having soul ties. So he has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of the offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected the multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harness our people and to eat out their substance. What would that be? Whatever they make as far as whatever they bring in, maybe taxes, maybe even that's what's happening here now. Someone work hard for a vehicle, a car, and they don't put it in a trust properly. And then somebody snatch it up and say, oh, we can't give you the report number. And then we hear on the news the cars are being shipped to another continent. Is that not the evidence of someone's sustenance, the assets that they work for? And I'm not saying like who is responsible for it, particularly, however, if the policy enforcers cannot, if the policy enforcers by neglect cannot help institute a system of order to know where the assets are at all times and give that to the people, then is this not eating out the substance of the people? He has affected to render the military independent and superior to the civil power. Now, if you go into your state constitutions, especially, I'm not sure if they're all been restated. I know at Maryland, they've been restated back to 1867. There was edits in 2020. New adoptions, I should say, in 2020, but it clearly says in many constitutions say this of the several states, which are like countries, right? They are countries in law. That's what they're considered. It says civil power is always superior to military. See, this is why we have to learn how to be in our proper person so that we can speak. Because if we don't speak, then it's thought that we acquiesce. And what has commonly been going on is their version of common law. You've been accepting these injustices. So what's the problem? Yes, as I've talked to people, and most of them don't read themselves because they are comfortable with the floating rate note. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution. Foreign to our Constitution. We still, in international law, there's still constitutions to this day. Like I just mentioned, 18 in Maryland, the 1867 Constitution is valid. So today I will be forwarding this injunction that I've created. An injunction is an order. It's an order to cease and desist with certain activities that I will not get into right now. But it is my responsibility to put that in the form of writing and to, if I would like to be on the do not disturb, do not detain list, if I don't want to be bothered, if I want it to be known in the state, and then that state communicates with the other states in an interagency type of manner in a jurisdiction, right? It's my responsibility to make sure it's given to these officers in a way that they are bound to honor and respect it. So I can say I'm free, but if I don't do the things that actually make me free, if I don't repent, then I won't truly be free. I might feel free, but I won't be free. And my God-given rights won't be protected. And that's another reason why it's important to restate Amer-Indian, Indian. And I would even say to go onto the record, because I have been to the museum of the American Indian. I think they renamed the museum. But the people who are the original and the Aboriginal Americans, the copper tone Americans, they're underrepresented there. Okay. And there's one wall, they just have two brothers in police officer uniforms. Like they just put them there. Like they didn't label that, okay, yeah, these are American Indians too. This is their proper category. If someone didn't know better, they'd be like, oh, I wonder why I got those pictures there. I know why the pictures are there. In that same museum, they also have a nice little corner with the Egyptian practices of burial. Because yes, this is Egypt too. Yes, the pyramids here are older than the ones in North Kebulon. Knowledge. So it must be restated. I'm not here telling you to go change your 181 either, because I've done that and I know that that's not, you change something in the matrix doesn't make you out of the matrix. So giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of the states. Now, let me just mention this. Okay, the Maryland Constitution will need to be restated, I guess, in an attempt to protect themselves. It's in there that no one shall be accused of treason. Like they're not going to accuse each other of treason. Now, on the federal level, like, so there's states' rights and then there's the federal government rights. But the states have a right to say on certain things, we don't accept what the federal government says. So if the federal government has laws for treason, if the state that is quote unquote sovereign says we are not going to accuse each other of treason, then that's what wins. And that's why you see the lawlessness that you do, because there are several offenses that take place on these lands that are of the nature of genocide. And so when you see someone being accused of treason at the Maryland Republic, we can go and see that that's actually, you can accuse them of that, and that it could be the case internationally what they've done is unethical and unacceptable. But until the Constitution is restated, it would be difficult to enforce that. And I think that that is something that needs to be done. It's like you just looking around to your neighbor and saying, no matter what you do wrong, I don't hold you responsible. Don't worry about that. Okay, so another thing that the king did is for cutting off all trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent. And today, you do know that you're paying taxes voluntarily per the IRS, per the laws that have been set forth by Congress. You do know that, right? Okay, which makes the debt deeper. And so why complain about anything when you feed what's going on that is not in your favor? And for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us of many cases of the benefit of trial by jury. Does that not happen often? For transporting us beyond the seas to be tried for pretended offenses. Oh, I know about pretended offenses. But because no one is held for treason, for abolishing a free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example of the fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies. So using fear, like they do, for many people who speak up for what is right, they're eliminated, putting the fear into others to not want to state what is right. For taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments. For suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. And so that's why it's the importance of the rights of indigenous peoples is to restore government, because that's where it starts. And so that's why it's important that the First Peoples here be identified, because we're going to know best. We're going to have the interests of the whole in mind. We are not trying to oppress anyone. It's a spiritual thing. It's right law. It's right government. And law first in time, first in line. Okay. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. So, on one hand, he's controlling them, but then on the other hand, he's declaring, oh no, I don't have to protect them, I just control them. Okay. And waging war against them. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coast, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to combat the works of death, desolation, tyranny, and already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy, sacrifice. Perfidy, scarcely split up word. Paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy of head of a civilized nation, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens, capital C, taken captive on the high seas, our bare arms against their countries to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us. He has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is the undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. So, as heirs, we need not petition for redress. As heirs, we make claims to the reversionary interest in our ancestral estate. And we use trusts, and we use our spirit and our mind. We create the right words, and we make declarations, and we learn law so that we can help others. And what I'm saying is not separate from what people on the African continent are saying. Okay. So it's important to be yourself, to free yourself. Don't say you're someone you're not, especially if you're not able to go back and research that culture. If you return to your true culture, then you'll have enlightenment as to which way to move and to go and how to help each other, recognizing the differences, not pretending someone is someone they're not, just to survive. Okay. Nor have we been wanting in intentions to our British brother. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. And isn't that what we're talking about today? Is establishing our original indigenous superior jurisdictions. Okay. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed, see, immigration and settlement. The founders of this document, they immigrated and settled here to come away from the oppressive hand of British Moorish king, but into the lands of the Indians, the copper tone one, as Webster described them here before the, I'll just say it like that, for the ones who are sometimes eliminating the copper colored tribes from the corporate tribes that do have the protection of the US. So there needs to be a jurisdiction outside of the US, because that is just the proper way to do it. All right, we have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by ties of our common kindred and disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and sanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind enemies in war. In peace, friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for rectitude of our intentions due in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies. See, the good people of these colonies, not in the name of the good people in these colonies and the savage Indians. It says, by the authority of the good people in these colonies, solemnly punish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. So what it is the states are built upon the us states of the land, and the people of the land are the original indigenous ones who many times are referred to as something that they're not. They are the original American Indians. Okay. I think it's cleaner to say Amer-Indian, because it differentiates the corporate label. That's all. That's my opinion. They are absolved from allegiance to the British crown. They're declaring here that the colonies are absolved from the allegiance to the British crown, and that they are political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought be totally dissolved. However, that did not happen, as evidenced by the gold trim on the flag. That's a flag that has been captured by the British crown. And that the free independent states that have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may have the right to do. And for the support of this declaration with the firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, not bloodline, divine providence. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Of course, this was signed by, autographed by John Hancock and Bartlett, Thornton, Payne, Adams, Burling. Okay. So I just want to share with you a little bit of history about who we are and how it's our responsibility to know the law. It's here in the public for us to read the history so we can figure it out. All right. One thing is nations are trusts, and they're described in different ways. But I like Anne LaFleur. She has a presentation on a YouTube channel. It's a multi-part series by Fearless Floyd, and she explains trusts. And then if you read that, and then you start to learn about jurisprudence, law prudence, and read the trust law for the District of Columbia, and then read the trust law for whatever state in which you have assets or you have contracts. And I could give you a lot of information, but I just think that that's a good place to start, particularly for people who want unity and want peace on these lands, because there are those who don't want peace on the lands, because as soon as we are peaceful and unified with each other, allowing people to call themselves what they want to, except for we're not going to let them hurt themselves and call them something ridiculous. I'm making the case for Amer-Indian to be restated. This is legal and lawful notice as this restatement, and forthcoming as it relates to nation states. Because if you go to the customary international law, there's certain rights that are enforced as nation states. And if you see how, what is that young lady's name? Shanquella Robinson. She was not under the protection, obviously, of the U.S. corporation. If she was under the protection, then why weren't those who were responsible for her death, why weren't they punished? Who were they? Who were they? Who were they? They weren't her friends. Friends don't hurt each other like that. So clearly, they're demonstrating for the world that we are not under their protection in many circumstances. Another case, Wendy Williams. Is she under the protection? In fact, I would like to know what kind of warrant. Was there a warrant that took her from one state of Florida and physically moved her to New York, where she is not, if she's detained and she's separate and not in touch with her family, that is an indication of her level of functioning decreasing, right? She was being taken care of by her son, and she made it clear how much she wanted her son to have what she earned, and now he had to move out of his luxury apartment that she would have wanted for him. So that's a decrease in level of functioning. What kind of written affidavit oath was used to take her from Florida to New York, where she had beach and could ground in line with her body and her chakras and her energy to New York? Well, I know how they did it. They did it under power of attorney. And they also were able to do it because her son doesn't yet know law and how to defend her honor But hopefully more sisters will recognize that religion cannot separate us anymore, because these things have to be true things. And any righteous religion is going to have you protect each other, no matter how you connect with the Most High, or what you call the Most High. Okay. Thank you for listening. Restating. Let me put this down here in my banner. I love you, Moors. Thank you for teaching me so much. Y'all the ones who encouraged me to read. And I don't mind being called Moorish American. It's just that doesn't totally capture the culture of which I've come. So you can call me a Moor if you want to call me a Moor. I'm just more than a Moor. I'm a Moor too. Okay. Let's see.